All right. I'm not sure how good the audio is because the earbuds I have currently right now, not very good. They definitely have fallen off in terms of just like the audio that can be like put out. Also, I think the left one is not working. But I'm just going to say, fuck it. Let's just go right now. There's probably going to be some B-roll playing in the background. But one thing I wanted to talk about today is something that I've seen where there's been quite the dissatisfaction that you've seen with like disillusionment with gaming. And one of these very popular videos about how gaming used to be fun is literally just like the B-roll is just Minecraft. And just knowing that, I'll just give pretty much what my personal experience is playing Minecraft. So I honestly think I kind of have a curse of playing Minecraft because practically every person I've been friends with that I've played Minecraft with, I've eventually like dissolved our relationship or just dissolved differently. You know, it always ended that way. But I would also like to say that I probably was put onto that game very early. And funny enough, there is a little story about that with a little creeper hoodie that I wore first day of middle school, but that's getting off topic. So when I noticed this kind of decline in quality was probably around time Destiny got released, post Grand Theft Auto 5, maybe even Destiny got released like at a different time around then, but I don't quite remember. Maybe it was like 2013, 2015. Can't remember exactly. Like I said, it's just like a blur now. But GTA 5 was definitely one of the like last games I remember. And I kind of think this is why GTA 6 is very highly anticipated. That was like huge, big deal. People loved it, even though it didn't have multiplayer in it yet. But kind of after that, and honestly, this is the whole like issue with, I think it's 8th gen. 8th gen has this huge issue of just like kind of mediocre, probably, I would say mediocre games for the most part compared to like 6th or 7th gen. 7th gen, obviously, a lot of nostalgia, especially if you played first person shooters. But you also have to realize that the huge popularity of COD at that time led to a lot of developers that were making first-person shooters bending to how COD's designed, which is actually pretty ridiculous when you actually get down under the hood of how it makes homogeneous maps, right? The 3-lane map system. ADS basically locks on to targets, so it's like there's not really any aiming, and then the movement is just like running, sprinting. It's honestly less movement than like Halo, because with Halo, even when you're shooting, you're still moving at max speed. That's a very important thing to note. And it's funny how somehow we went from a lot of movement with Quake when you have like bunny hopping and all that stuff to having sprint, which arguably is less movement, because then it's like, all right, well, now we have to design maps where it's like, you know, we don't want you to sprint and shoot. We don't want that to be a thing. We don't even like want sprint to really be like a resource. I mean, they kind of tried to do that with like Halo 5 is like your shields don't recharge if you're sprinting, which it's kind of Halo 5 much less explicitly a COD clone compared to Halo 4, but it still definitely made a lot of like compromises, which I kind of look at the Halo trilogy to like 343's Halo trilogy, kind of like you could even think about it like Star Wars, right? Where it's the difference between the original trilogy and the prequels. I'm not exactly too sold on being a hater of like 343's games. I think probably the worst game they made was literally Halo 4, and that's because it's literally trying to be Call of Duty. and it's just not a good product for people that like Halo, because that whole idea of like, let's make it COD caters to the lowest denominator, the like gamer that literally does not want to learn how to play this other game. They just want every first person shooter to be similar to COD, because COD makes them feel strong, and COD does that because COD makes it very easy. COD is not a hard game at all. I think you would be very hard pressed to say that it's even easier to play COD than it is to play like Valorant or CSGO, because at least in those games you have very much permadeath, because you're not respawning, and you know your movement, what you use, it's very very consequential compared to COD, where you run like a damn like ninja, firing guns for the most part, which are fully automatic. Honestly, the whole like automatic versus like semi-automatic, it really doesn't matter too much, because the time to kill on all those guns is like pretty standardized, unless like, you know, you just like aim hack. But you know, this kind of design of like, let's cater to the lowest denomination definitely has like also applied to genres, where you will have like very popular first person shooters, arguably MOBAs, but honestly I don't even consider MOBAs to even really be a lowest common denominator. Like, they did, most of them, for the most part, only specific MOBAs stand out. But I think like the shooter is very much one of those games where it caters to like the lowest level player. Not even the lowest level player, but it caters to the player that will refuse to learn. And I think that's very prominent. My bad. You know, words aren't doing too well. Kind of just woke up, but it's very prominent in Fortnite, where they literally made a mode that took the unique skill of building, because people didn't want to learn building, and it made it its own mode, which is kind of interesting, because something like Street Fighter doesn't do that. It does have like the like baby easy mode modern, which it does make easy is like counterplaying, and like, you know, confirms not nearly as impressive in modern compared to like classic. So there could be an argument there to be made that maybe they both should have a different queue, like how, you know, you have no builds and you have the regular Fortnite game. But it's kind of also been a thing where it's like, just the same way how a lot of first person shooters bent to COD's will, now you have a lot of like fighting games that bend to like the will of literally the player that thinks that fighting games are just mashing buttons. Like, there's no blocking, there's none of that. They basically enable a lot of this with like armor and invincibility and just like damage that honestly like is not deserved. You see this with Tekken and Heat, where I think a major difference between like how a 3D fighter works versus how a 2D fighter works is how you do damage. Because generally in a 3D fighter, damage is very high, but it's also not really like something where it's like you have chip or whatnot. Maybe I can see it on slower attacks or whatever, but it's really not interesting to me. And that's why I think, honestly, like Virtua Fighter having ring outs and just like a very deadly wall game is much more interesting than like Tekken's nothingness, where it's like Tekken, I think, is more about the defense game. And it's very telling that when they make that defense game, that like fundamentals of like Korean backdashing and all of that, when they make that worse, they just cater to the scrubs that spam attacks and shit. They literally cater to the worst players. The worst players in the room, they're making that game for it. Why? Because the pros are still going to play it. But I'm going to end it there. Thanks.